Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this LinkedIn Live, and a very special one we have too, right in the middle of Pride Month. And today we're exploring the output of the sensational LGBT plus jam that was held in April 13th and 14th for 36 hours, and the amazing report that came out of that. IBM sponsored that jam. As you know, IBM is celebrating its 110 years this week and this year. And so many of those years have been in support of authenticity and difference. I was very honored to be asked to host as an ally a section of those 36 hours. The 7 hours we were online, listening, learning, understanding. And it is so indicative of IBM's approach to helping the world that from that jam, insights, learnings were then put into this extraordinary report, an LGBT plus, really up to the minute report that will be in the live chat for you all to take a glance at or read in full. I really recommend it. And we are absolutely thrilled today to have two of the four authors of that report, who were also quintessentially important in the jam itself, to answer the questions that you've been sharing with me through the course of this month. And I'd love to welcome them both. Firstly, Anthony Marshall, who is a Senior Research Director at IBM's very famous Institute for Business Value, that collates and collects and understands points of view around the world on all issues of importance to business and society. And Ella Slade, who is the global head of LGBT plus for all of IBM globally. So real great and good contributors. And I'm going to ask Anthony and Ella to talk a little bit about themselves before we go into the report. And Anthony, let me ask you first of all to share a little bit about you and what you do.
Thank you, Harriet. And it's really great to be here with everyone. So as Harriet mentioned, I'm the Senior Research Director of the IBM Institute for Business Value, which is we call IBV for short. And the IBV is really IBM's thought leadership arm. And so we have probably 50 researchers that I oversight, really working on a variety of topics, mostly about how technology is impacting business in the future. And so it's been a real pleasure to do some research and engagement around the topic of diversity and inclusion more generally. We've done studies over the past 6 months on female experience in the workforce, the Hispanic experience, the Black experience, and of course LGBT plus, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some of the work that we're doing. And so as an out IBM executive particularly, it's been tremendous to have another form of intersectionality, if you will, of this sort of content intersecting with the work that we do in the Institute.
Thank you so much, Anthony. We're really so privileged to have you, and I want to thank you for taking the time globally to do this. And so now to you, Ella, please tell us a little more.
Thanks, Harriet, and thanks for having us here today. It's fantastic to just be able to keep talking about the LGBT plus report and some of the great findings from the jam. It was so fun. And I know we'll get into that in a bit. So I'm Ella Slade. My pronouns are they and them. I work in our global diversity inclusion team at IBM. I look after the LGBT plus community around the world. So basically, anyone who's LGBT plus at IBM, I'm in some way, shape or form responsible for their inclusion. So there's lots of things going on. It keeps me very, very busy. Pride Month especially is very busy, but it's fantastic. It really is. It's just one of those such amazing roles where I really just get to see that direct impact that I'm making every single day.
Thank you so much. And as I say, so privileged to have you as co-authors. My only intro that I'll give to this session personally is that my pledge is almost 35 years old. So for some of you on this recording, that makes me seem ancient, and I do worry about that. But I committed some 35 years ago to do all within my power to actively and publicly support and mentor as a passionate ally, all within the LGBT plus community, such that our unique and special differences are cherished. And that uniqueness is because of our age, our sex, our color, our creed, our sexuality, and our physical and cognitive abilities. So with that, let's get on to the questions, and we're open to taking more questions throughout this. But one of the first questions that came up very strongly, I think, from this was, both of you are pledged to understanding and supporting the community. What surprised you the most about some of the new themes that came out of the JAM and featured in the report?
Ella, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think we expect is that each year inclusion gets better and discrimination decreases when it comes to the LGBT plus community. I think that's just something that we expect to be true. So I think one of the things that actually surprised me quite a lot was the fact that 45% of LGBT respondents to the research actually said that they felt that they are still discriminated against, and that others of their sexual orientation are still discriminated against in the workplace. That's nearly half of people. So that was quite staggering to me in terms of quite how prevalent discrimination still is based on sexual orientation. Other things that really stuck out, the fact that this is from the JAM, but the fact that 9% of our JAM respondents said that they cannot express their gender authentically in the workplace. 9%, again, that's huge. That's really significant. It's practically 1 in 10 people. So I think things like that really stuck out. And then the final one for me that I'd say is kind of on my list of things that was pretty alarming was the fact that we had 20% of LGBT people of color said that they had experienced extreme discrimination. So some form of extreme discrimination compared to 4% of white people. So that obviously is alarming. It really, really is. So I think those statistics all kind of coming together was, pretty staggering. But they were my kind of key takeaways from the report.
Yeah. And I think building on that, one of the biggest things that really surprised me is that when we asked people in the survey where the focus of the discrimination has been in their lives, most people would expect it would be the workplace, and it wasn't. The number one was higher education, and the second most intense source of discrimination was secondary education, and then came workplace and others. And so we often think about higher education as being, bastions of civility and openness, and that's not the experience of the LGBT plus individuals that we engage with in the JAM, and also in the survey that we did to support it.
Yes, very, very interesting. I was very surprised as we come on to the second question in my sort of 7-hour posting, which was just such a rich experience in every single sense. But I was quite surprised to which the level to which quite successful LGBT plus individuals and kind of collections of people felt acute, really acute imposter syndrome, that they were somehow frauds, that they really shouldn't be there. And I was interested in your advice in terms of how to help strengthen the sense of confidence and worthiness that you both give in your work.
Yeah, I think just to start things off, I think for me, it's around surrounding yourself by people who believe in you. Not necessarily yes people, because they don't necessarily, that's not the most helpful thing if they just say yes to everything, but surrounding yourself by people who are your champions and your cheerleaders. That definitely really helps me. I know I have people that I can go to just to sense check things, to say, hey, I did this thing, do you want to see it? And they're like, that's great. Or sometimes they'll be like, that's great, but maybe next time you could do this. So I think that kind of sense check to not only just say, yes, you're amazing, but also to give you that reality check as well, I think is really helpful. And I think from a kind of imposter syndrome perspective, it's hugely important to have your own champions, and to have those champions, I think, outside of your immediate day job spheres, outside of like your manager and your immediate team, is even more critical, I'd say, as well.
Yeah.
I think following up on that, with everything that's happened in the last 2 years with Black Lives Matter and other communities that are really demanding to be heard, it's never been a sort of more open to opportunity or time for LGBT plus, or indeed other groups or individuals, to really demand attention. So certainly in our organization, and I'm sure many other organizations, there is there's a real openness to individuals expressing their authentic selves, a desire for radical candor, which of course can be very difficult, but all of that sort of is part of this thing of now is the opportunity to overcome those sorts of emotional hurdles that many of us have experienced over our lives.
Absolutely. So for those of you who are just joining, there's a little spike in joinership. To remind you, we're reviewing the latest and greatest LGBT plus report. We have two of the authors of that report, Anthony Marshall and Ella Slade here. And I just got an amazing question through that I would ask you both about. It's actually from someone I know who worked with me a long time ago when I was the CEO at Premier Farnell, and we were rolling out an IBM solution globally to e-commerce. David Long asked, a technology standard such as ITIL, which is universally accepted all over the world, states all people, users are equal. Does this help or hinder, in your opinions, the acceptance of inclusion, being your authentic self in the workplace? So sorry not to give you any warning of that. David's very good at coming up with the best things, and I'm delighted he's on. But any thoughts on that?
No, that's a great question. It really is. I think the reality is that we're not all equal. I think that's a really important thing for us to remember. I was asked a very similar question yesterday as well, which is, similar kind of thing. We're all equal. Why don't we just treat everybody the same and just get on with it, essentially? But it's very difficult to do that when you are facing, 45% of LGBT plus people are facing discrimination. So I think it's, in an ideal world, yes, everybody is equal and everybody should be equal. However, I think it's taking a step back and looking at, okay, actually, structurally and kind of systemically in our society, we are not equal. We were not set up to be equal because of history and all that kind of stuff as well. So I think it will take a long time for us to get to that point where we are equal. I certainly hope we do. I certainly hope I work myself out of a job. That's definitely the goal. But yeah, I don't think we're there yet, but we will be at some point. I'm hopeful.
And it's almost like a cop-out and an excuse to say we're all equal. And one of the things that we learned very clearly from the Jam is, even in many countries where we've had equal opportunity legislation, anti-discrimination, anti-vilification legislation for years, decades, right? There's still enormous evidence of people feeling that they have been disadvantaged or discriminated against in a variety of ways. And by assuming everyone is equal, it's negating the individuality, whether it's sexual orientation or sexual identity or gender identity or race or whatever. It's really negating the importance of individual expression, right?
Yes, I think that's very, very profound and very important. And please keep those questions coming. One thing that really wowed me from the jam, and I wanted to get your views, were so many examples of great allyship, both advocacy, allyship, and I think I'm always, as you know, interested in things that I can be doing differently and better. Is there anything that stood out from for you in what you heard, in what you saw, or am I just looking at this through, and this does sometimes happen, as you both know, through rose-tinted glasses, because I want to believe that allyship is on the up and on the increase. What do you both feel?
I mean, the jam was an amazing experience for me. It was my first ever jam. I had no idea what to expect. 36 hours or however long it was. I didn't know what that would quite entail. It was a whirlwind. It really was amazing. Such an amazing experience. It's this online jam platform, all kind of text conversations, and it just felt very special. So I was one of the facilitators of the trans and non-binary belonging area, and we had some phenomenal conversations happening. And I think one of the things that really stood out for me and that I remember the most is the fact that we actually had people growing and developing their own understanding of their own gender identity live there in the jam, because they hadn't been in a space surrounded by so many trans and non-binary people all talking about their own gender and what it means to them and how they arrived at their own understanding, that actually seeing that really helping other people who are maybe earlier on in their journey was just phenomenal. It was so powerful. There were a lot of allies that were kind of seeing the conversations and commenting and just thanking people, and I think that was really special to see.
I agree.
And cutting the other way. And so Ella mentioned some of the experience of Black LGBT plus and Hispanic LGBT plus. Our community has the ability, and I think have been effective, particularly in the last 2 years, of really providing allyship to other communities as well, such as the Black community, such as the Hispanic community, in helping those communities realize the demands and expectations that they have of creating a better society and a fairer society as well. So it really is groups coming together to support each other mutually as well.
Yeah. I agree, Anthony. I really felt that on the jam. The sort of, as Ella said, that the sort of the building text examples and experience that grew with a genuine sense of pride was quite. I was very emotional at certain points during those exchanges. So it was just a brilliant thing to do, and so well done from a technology perspective. And I think people felt it was a safe place to share, which is so important. Now, a more challenging question in a sense, and as you know, I have a strong followership across Asia and particularly India. And I thought it was useful for perhaps you to share how IBM helps employees and communities in countries whose laws don't always work for being one's authentic self in a public place, in a workplace, in primary, secondary, or indeed tertiary education. So we have a large kind of following there, and I know you're both traveled and experienced in this area. What is your advice and input here, if I may?
Yeah, and this is an area that is one of the more stressful parts of my job, to be honest, because obviously I look after the LGBT plus community, and they exist everywhere. Even in these countries where it is either illegal to be LGBT plus, or there's varying kind of levels of cultural and social norms as well. From an IBM perspective, we have an equal opportunity policy that we've had for a very long time that covers sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression as part of it, amongst many other things as well. that is a global equal opportunity policy. It applies absolutely everywhere that IBM does business. So within the kind of safety of IBM, we do not tolerate any form of discrimination based on any of those kind of identities I just listed or more. And I think that for many countries in kind of Western society or maybe more kind of liberal countries, that may not seem like such a big deal. It's like, well, okay, sure, whatever. But in some of these countries, that is so key and so important to them, because they know that at least in the workplace, they are safe and they are protected. And that is very, very powerful. Other things that we do is we try to make sure that we, obviously we comply with local law in all of these countries as well. However, we see what we can do to create a safe space. And I think that's been really important for us. So we, for example, we use Slack at IBM, a messaging system, and we have a separate Slack workspace that is not connected to the enterprise grid. It's a separate workspace entirely. And one of the reasons for that being separate is that IBMs are able to join that anonymously. Only a handful of people can actually see who those IBMers are. And so once you're on there, you can change your name. And that is fantastic. Not only creating a safe space where anybody from any country can in theory join, but it's also really great just in general for IBMers who aren't out yet. And we especially see a lot of trans IBMers actually start using their new name on there first, changing their profile picture on there first and getting to know people. So I think there's a few things that organizations can do. Obviously, we have to comply with local law, and that is difficult to take, but we do. But it's just creating that safe space and seeing what we can do and making sure that employees feel safe.
Yeah. So reinforcing that is multinational organizations particularly can be a real force for good in this context. They can with their regional offices, they can become bastions or oases, if you will, of safety. And that means it's even more important that multinational organizations ensure that the principles that underpin their culture that are easy to implement in places like the UK or the US, relatively speaking, are consistent throughout the wider organizations, so that the leadership that you'll experience in the US or the UK is the same in terms of the principles and the openness and acceptance in any other country, irrespective of the local laws.
Thank you. I think it's a superb inputs and I think very helpful. We've just had a question that I thought you guys would kind of love. For everyone, we're exploring the LGBT plus latest report. Two of the authors from IBM on LinkedIn Live with us. And someone's just said, please may I ask what a jam is and what it was, which I think shows what a lovely safe place this is. So I think you should try and do it succinctly, a verb, an adjective, a noun, as to what this amazing jam was and probably likely will be in the future.
Anthony, I'll let you take this one. You're more of a jam expert than me. This is my
I wouldn't say that. But a jam is like a platform that you join in order to have engagement. In this case, it's text, it's chat. And a jam occurs over, if you think of a sort of a chat room, but sort of a heavy duty, multifaceted, multi-experiential sort of chat room, but across multiple dimensions. And so in the LGBT plus jam that we conducted, we had 7 major areas, 7 major discussion themes. And so you had individuals engaging in each of those discussion areas. Intersectionality was one of them. The impact of technology on the LGBT plus community was another one, for example. But a wide range of topics. And in each of those areas, you had hosts that would facilitate discussion and come in with a perspective. We had VIPs coming in for a period of time, leaders of various organizations or groups, and as Ella mentioned, facilitators that would be monitoring what was going on in order to highlight particular topics or areas of interest. And it was fascinating. The jam went for 34 hours. People weren't expected to stay on for 34 hours, but they could come in and out. And I think this was, in terms of the interest and commitment to the jam, this was, I think, the most intense jam that we've ever had. We had around 2,000 people joining. They joined an average of 6 or 7 times, and they stayed in the jam off and on for more than 6 hours. And so people really felt engaged, and they came back and back and back during their work days or into the evening. And so we really got a sense of community, albeit temporary, of 34 hours, but this really intense experience.
So that'll teach me to ask a brilliant IBMer to give me a short version, but that was wonderful, Anthony. But it's a bit more than a verb adjective now. Anyway, another question that's come up, and we knew it would. Some advice for people on how do we better embrace intersectionality in the workplace, please?
Yeah, I think with intersectionality, I think we have to be intentional with it. We can't just say that, oh, we'll just do an LGBT+ panel and someone on that panel might happen to, I don't know, also have a disability or might be a person of colour. We can't rely on there might be. We really have to be proactive and just conscious of everything that we're doing to make sure that we are driving for change and we are working together. Certainly in my role, obviously I look after the LGBT+ community on my team. I have teammates that look after other communities as well. We all work so closely together on various different events, programs, initiatives to ensure that we're doing things together and having different focuses and looking at things through different lenses. We had a fantastic event earlier on this week looking at Juneteenth and recognising and celebrating Juneteenth during Pride Month. And we had a fantastic external speaker that came in who was able to talk to both of those experiences. And I think that's it, really. We just have to be proactive with this and intentional, because otherwise it's not going to happen.
Anthony, anything you would add?
I think that's a tremendous experience, and Juneteenth is a great example, particularly with the legislation that's just been passed by Congress, and that is a wonderful example of intersectionality.
Fantastic. Well, I hope that we've given everyone a chance. We're going to do one final question in terms of really inspiring you to read this great report that Ella and Anthony have authored with 2 other great folks from IBM. I think that for me, one of the biggest things that I've gone away and done differently from the report is be much more sensitive to and thoughtful about the generational differences that were highlighted in the report. And if you had to each pick one thing that would best help our next gens, what might that be?
Anthony, you can go first.
Thank you. Yeah, I might actually flip that, because the next generation are so impressive and so demanding of self-expression and self-identification and the acceptance of the uniqueness of themselves, that generation has enormous lessons for my generation that struggled with some of these issues far more. And hopefully the work that we have done as other generations, I won't say other generations, has helped that generation or the new generations to be able to experience that. But I have been so impressed with the generations coming through, and it's, I think I have learned a lot from them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Anthony. I have a number of mutual menteeing relationships, and I call them mutual menteeing because they totally are. Younger people with very, very different views, and I learn so much. So I completely echo that. The last word, Ella, from you, perhaps?
Yeah, I was going to say kind of the same thing, really, was around, I think my thing would be to older generations who've maybe been in the workforce quite a bit longer, to listen to younger generations, to listen to their needs, to listen to what they want, and to learn. I think, we never stop learning as human beings. And I think, especially when it comes to learning about diversity and inclusion, we are always going to be able to learn more. So I'd say to just listen and continue learning.
And it's wow to see the output of that. I remember in Asia Pacific region, we did mutual mentoring across the senior team with some of the younger generations, and the combinational force and creativity and pride was just amazing to see. So I want to thank you both for giving so much of your time for this brilliant report, for IBM, for ensuring that this amazing jam yielded so much. There will be many, many more conversations, but thank you for this one and for everyone that joined. We are deeply appreciative.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.
Thank you.